Well, hello and welcome everyone to Calling from the Wilderness, which this is our 11th session together. Technically, actually, it's our 12th, but you'd have to look back at all the other sessions to see why that magical number has changed. And I'll give you a hint, it happened around Easter, but I won't say anymore. Just as you can see on our outline, especially if you've joined us before, you'll notice we've got a slightly new and updated outline for today. We're trying something slightly different, which is something that we've been talking about for a little while. We decided we were kind of talked about it enough. Now it's time to actually do something about it. So what you'll notice is that the kind of outline of the session itself is relatively the same, but what we're going to be doing over the coming weeks, coming months, will be to invite different people to come and join us, to add a third voice, to add a different perspective, and
Trinity.
as part of that, what's that?
Trinity. We've got
And,
three voices.
yeah. Right now we're falling very short, but once we get one more, we're going to be complete. Um, it's happening, and so what we want to do though is when we invite people, especially those who you might not know, give you a chance to get to know them a little bit. So we're going to have three questions, and I'm going to give those three questions to Derek first, and then we're going to jump into to our text today, which you can see is from the Sermon on the Mount. So for the next 3 weeks, we're going to spend time in the Sermon on the Mount, doing three different pieces. We're going to be starting today with the Beatitudes. Next week, we'll be doing conversation about salt and light. And then finally, the law and the prophets. And what we're going to be doing is breaking everything down into kind of 4-week sections, where the first 3 weeks we have a set of passages around the same, whether it's the same book, maybe the same chapter. And then on the 4th week, we're going to actually take questions from those weeks, whether it was questions that we had or questions that you've submitted. So we want to make this a bit more kind of conversational and interactive. So as you think of things, do feel free to add them in the chats or the comments, send us in a message directly, and we'll kind of add those into the mix. And so on every 4th week, we'll take time to actually go back and look into some of those questions and have a bit more of a dig around what we've been thinking about. So here we go. These are the questions that you're going to hear when we first have a guest. So I'm going to give them to Derek, especially if any of you don't know the lovely, wonderful Derek, who survived being my college roommate for a year. So, amongst other things, he is a great man of patience and endurance. So, Derek, question 1. Who are you?
My name is Derek Edmund Wilson. I was born in northwestern Ontario to a single mother. I have a sister who has a different father with her, and then I grew up in the church, a couple different churches I was a part of, and then went to Bible school, got my bachelor's of biblical studies. That's where me and Tim met. He was his first year, my second year. We were roommates. And then stuck around the town of Eston for a little bit, and then moved out here to Duncan, BC, and hired as the youth director, and have progressed into the church coordinator / youth director / everything else during this COVID time. Yeah, and that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. Well, and you answered the second question already, which was what do you do? So you're even ahead of yourself. So then the third and final question is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Okay, so I was just reminded of this yesterday because someone else was asking about advice from some trolls and haters on the internet. And the one that I've really been sticking to lately, especially in a leadership position, is don't take criticism from anyone you wouldn't take advice from. And so there's lots of people who are willing to criticize you and offer their inputs, which are all valid and valid to them. But if I didn't know them well enough, or um, know that they knew enough about what they were speaking about to ask them for advice, I'm not going to take criticism from them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, There you go. We could end now. And
Yeah, and
you're
that's what the Beatitudes is all about. Criticism.
but just in a vain hope that we might be able to add some more wisdom to what's already been shared, let's dive into our text today. So our text today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, looking at verses 1 to 12. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Seeing the crowds, he went up to the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecute the prophets who were before you.
So, Derek, have you got a word or phrase that's jumped out to you as we were reading this afternoon?
Well, yeah, the last one that popped out to me was the last verse about being persecuted. And I know when Starbucks changes their cups or someone says happy holidays to me, this is the verse that I hold to. This is the rock, the verse that gives me comfort when I am being persecuted in Western civilization. Yeah, it's just funny. The thing that struck out to me is
Your emails can be directed to Derek at
yeah,
Duncan St. Andrews. Yeah.
yeah. I think the persecution we experience and the persecution he's referring to here are slightly different. Um, what is the meaning of blessed? what is so when he's saying blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed, what is he what do we think that means? And is
Mm,
that necessarily what Jesus was referencing or talking about when
mm,
he said this?
mm, mm,
Um, and then just the overall, like it has so much to do with what we do with ourselves, like our relationship with God, and how that
mm,
impacts our relationship with others. Like there's so many
mm,
that are get your heart right and then be there with people, comfort those who mourn, do this with them. And so it's a
mm,
lot of talking about the relationship between all of them. I'm doing a
mm.
little dance here, but you know what I mean.
It's a dance of persecution, Derek. It's a
The
dance of
dance.
persecution. Yeah, when we were reading through in a very like not theologically interesting way at all, but the way that this translation goes, the disciple he sat down, the disciples come to him, and he opened his mouth and
Yeah.
taught them, saying, and I was like, that is just, it's such a great way, like, of all the things he could have said, he could have just said, and he taught them, saying, but no, he opened his mouth
Yeah.
and taught them, saying, which makes me wonder, did the other times where he didn't open his mouth, was that like some like interpretive dance, like you were just doing in the
Mhm.
spirit of Jesus, right?
Or he was doing
Yeah.
the Francis of Assisi, teach them the gospel, and if it's necessary, use words part, right?
It- oh man, the
That's probably
original
who he got it
Francis.
from.
Yeah. Oh man. So you've already mentioned a couple of things that you got for questions. Was there any other questions you wanted to add in other than kind of the concept of blessed and idea about relationship with God?
No, I think that's all for me. I think we can take those two and go anywhere with them.
Run, take them right to the bank. Yeah, I think like for me the thing that I was really struck with was like there's no reference, all the kind of statements of blessed are have nothing, seem to have nothing to do with Jesus until the very end, when he says, when they utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. And that's like the first time where there seems to be an actual kind of Christology, or kind of aspect of at least in my reading, an aspect of kind of Christian proclamation, which I think is really interesting, because I feel like, yeah, well, I can start the clock, and then I can tell you, it feels like I grew up thinking that all the blessed are were all things that were all about kind of your walk with God, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
what?
like to piggyback on that when I'm reading those, you don't necessarily have to have a relationship with Jesus or God to be a peacemaker or to, comfort those who mourn or things like that, right? Like it's not
Mm,
intrinsically tied
mm,
with that. So yeah, like when I was growing up, I'd be like, okay, I'm a Christian now. These are my roles to do.
mm,
And you have to be a follower of Jesus to be a part of the Beatitudes, but
mm.
maybe maybe that's not necessarily the case. Maybe there's people outside of Christianity that are also doing the Beatitudes.
You just keep bringing that up, that there could be people outside of the church doing God's work, Derek.
I know, but like maybe it's just this year, or maybe it's just because I thought about it so much more. It's like I've really been praying that God would open my eyes to see what He's doing, and not necessarily
Mm,
just in the church, but in the community,
mm,
the people outside the church. Like God is working. He's not limited to
mm,
Christianity or Christians, right? He's always working and doing things, and want my eyes to be open to what He's doing so I can help. I can be involved
mm,
with Him instead of keeping asking Him, "Hey, I'm doing this. Come join me, God." I'll be like, "Hey, God, what are
mm,
you doing? How can I
mm,
join what you're doing?" And
mm,
sometimes that
mm.
takes me outside of the church. Weird. Anyway, so that's a tangent. That's we could just go off on that.
But I think what's really interesting about that whole idea and this particular passage is like, Jesus is talking about people who are blessed because of because of crap that's happening in their lives,
Mm,
right? Like, and it's not until the very final one where he kind of offers some comfort. It's for people who might like proclaim a certain faith, but before then, it's, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers. Like and there actually is a little bit of a, I guess that's the thing, is now that I read it out loud again and in talking, it's like there's the first five of them, I guess, are the things that kind of our first four of them are about like people in their kind of position in life. And then there's the things that the people strive for, mercy, pureness of heart, peacemaking. But then it goes back to, who's the people who are persecuted. And as you say, that kind of question about persecution. But I think you're right, is like this whole passage for me has always been about kind of where do I find myself as the faithful follower of Jesus who's also blessed because I'm doing the things Jesus is saying. Whereas it seems the focus seems to be not on the person who's doing the blessing, or who's participating in the blessing, but the person who's doing the things who then becomes blessed.
mm,
I'm just,
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So like those, like the first five, those have kind of already, those are the people already, and because they're like that, or they're already poor in spirit, they're already meek, they're already that, they'll be given this later kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Like they're maybe, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, and some of that stuff, like, again, as you say, over the last year particularly, is like people have found themselves in meek positions. People have found themselves mourning. People have found themselves, poor, poor physically and in spirit. And it's like, these are things that are happening to them. And God is saying that those are the people who are being blessed.
Hmm. Yeah. It's funny, when they say, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." I've always just assumed that that was God, that God was going to comfort them, right? But what if it's us as a community building a relationship with that person because we're comforting them, we're there with them, we're walking with them in what they're doing? Um, like I think some of this is, it's on us to almost be that reward in some of them.
Yeah, I love that idea, which probably
Yeah.
won't surprise you.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I love it too is I've I've heard a fair bit of sermons, and been in a few contexts myself where there's also been an implication that there's a lack of responsibility on the side of me as the Christian, or me as part of the church, to be a part of that blessing, because, as you say, that's something that God is doing. And so instead of standing alongside of people in their mourning, we say, you are blessed, God is with you. And there's that sense of, actually, instead of seeing that as that opportunity to jump in and create that depth and intimacy of community and relationship, we say, it's okay, Jesus says you're blessed, so don't worry about it. And we don't then and then we also then don't have to worry about our responsibility in that circumstance. And so I like what you're saying there, that kind of challenge about kind of, is this an invitation to be those who come alongside of each other in these moments, to see ourselves as a community of blessing, or is that something that we're outsourcing to God?
Hmm. Yeah. I've even heard the, blessed for those who mourn, for they'll be comforted, or the you are blessed in this trial that you're facing and this mourning and loss because God is using that to increase your faith for what He's going to do later so that you'll be able to face even more challenges in that. Which I would say, well, I can't imagine going to a family who's lost a child or something terrible like that and being like, hey, you're blessed, so God can do something even harder next time for you and do that. That's kind of what
Mhm.
that reminded me of. But yeah, it's community, right? It's like when we're talking about being blessed, what is that? Like when you will inherit the earth, what does that mean? Like is that like I have to feel it's not like being in control of the world and setting up a government or something, right? It's got to be
Mhm.
relational with people.
Mhm.
Um,
It's interesting too, because as you say that, like I don't I don't remember enough Greek, and I don't have my Greek in front of me anyways, but it certainly is translated in the plural, that they, being more than one, will inherit the earth. They will receive mercy. They shall be called sons or children of God. It's a plurality, as you say, of people. And I think that, yeah, I guess that's the thing is, everything being so individually focused, even if there is a family of mourners, as you said in your example, but actually because we specify so much that individuality of it, we don't recognize, yeah, that kind of that participation in community that actually this is an invitation to. Yeah, until you said that, never seen this passage as an invitation into community.
yeah, like when I was doing my chaplaincy, fire
Mhm.
chaplaincy, one of the big things that was hit or emphasized to us was the ministry of presence, where when
Mhm.
people are going through tragedies and stuff, there will come a time where you have to walk with them through different arrangements or um, whatever it may be after, but that's later. Like they don't, even if they bring it up, they don't have to do that now. Your job right there is to just sit with them. You don't even have to say anything. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to be there so they know they're not alone in this.
Mhm.
And and I think that's a lot of what we're called to do is just to be with people wherever they're at, like show mercy, and we will be shown mercy. Those that are comforted, or blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. They will be shown, and even blessed are those that comfort, because you were in a real, tangible moment with someone going through something really
Mhm.
difficult, right? Like that is life. It's not the. It's it's when they are who they are, like at their most raw sense, and you have the opportunity to be there with them in that moment.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and so and like those blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Um, what are you what are you being persecuted about, or what what does that even look like for us today? In that is that maybe it's being persecuted, like how dare you give all your money to people that are hurt or need the money. My pager. um, how dare you give all that to, that's a stupid thing to do, or how dare you spend your whole life helping less fortunate people. It's all about money, 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 or who's going to look after you when you're older, or all these kind of things. Like there's not, doesn't have to necessarily look like the persecution back then. um,
Mhm.
and then you'll be given more. Like it's so counterintuitive to what we our idea is, like, yeah, go help people and stuff like that. But there's always a limit to it. There's always a put it in a box kind of, right? Like this is how much you can help without actually hurting yourself. This is how much you can do. This is how much of a peacemaker you can be without offending another side or doing this, right? This is how much mercy you can show without being taken advantage of. This is how
Mm,
much this. And I think this verse is just shooting that all out the window and saying there's no limit to it, there's no constraints on it. You just have to believe
mm,
that if you go down this path, this is going to happen. And
mm,
not a lot of people go down that path, so they never see the end of it. They go halfway down and realize it's too hard, and so they never get the blessed part of it. And
mm,
if they did, it's very hard to explain that to other people that are starting the path, being like, you have to go through all this, and maybe
mm,
blessed isn't blessed like we think, with like blessed with like finances or coverage or whatever. Maybe it's like I was talking about the comforting. Maybe it's being blessed to being able to be there for someone going through this, or
mm,
maybe it's being blessed that you are able to show mercy to someone that no one else is showing mercy to, that no one expects you to show mercy to, but you are able to help that person or even change that person's lives because you're able to show mercy to them. Like I'm thinking of right now the Les Miserables or
mm,
whatever the French, where that guy is stealing from the
mm.
church, and the priest is like, well, no, if you're going to go take this and take this, and that
Yeah.
act of kindness changes that gentleman's life, right? What
Mm,
if it's something like
mm,
that where you're blessed in the hurting and the giving
mm,
because you get to see something else happen in someone else?
mm, mm.
Anyway, you go for 10 minutes now.
No, no, no. I'm just soaking it all in, Dick. I'm soaking it all in. Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think it is. It's that question, and I guess it is that question about kind of what does it mean to be blessed,
Hmm.
and what do we believe is kind of God's blessing upon us, um, and and as you like the irony of something like where like blessed are those who mourn for they will be comforted. Um, Being comforted when you mourn doesn't necessarily feel like, as you say, that kind of blessing which we feel we're promised. So you've got, we've got the idea of what it means to be blessed, but then we've got the what we expect the kind of tangible expression of that to be, which obviously is where we get what's it called, the prosperity gospel, right?
Hmm.
Where like your life must tangibly have these signs of blessing and success so that you can then testify to God's blessing in your life. But the Beatitudes seem to it's like, what does it mean to inherit the earth? What does it mean to be satisfied if you thirst for righteousness? Or as you were saying, like those who are persecuted, it says, persecuted for righteousness' sake, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And there's that, it's like, all of these things are actually, it's not like, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall receive a Rolls Royce. And oh, blessed are you, Derek, for sneezing in the
Did you
middle
hear
of.
that? Because I muted it.
No, you hit your mute. You hit your mute.
Yeah.
But like it is funny that actually, we have these expectations about what being blessed looks like, and
Like we all,
it,
sorry.
it, no, I was just saying, and they very very conveniently also seem to very much mirror what success looks like culturally,
Mm.
right? And we don't actually stop and look at, like, as you say, like this invitation to community, this invitation to be alongside of each other, and to find that blessing is how we are kind of shown mercy, how we are fed, how we are comforted, how we see God. And I'm nothing about how many pairs of shoes we have in the car we have in the driveway, and yet we conflate that term blessing and bless, what it means to be blessed, into those tangible points of kind of cultural status.
Yeah, like as you're talking, I'm thinking we tend to look more towards like the Abraham and the David and the Solomon when we're talking about being blessed, and not Jesus or the disciples, the ones that were
Um,
persecuted and died, right? Like blessing in our head means those are the ones we look to in the Old Testament, like lots of land and stuff like that. But name someone in the New Testament who would be considered blessed, except other maybe the rich young ruler who turned it all down. Like, so what
yeah.
are we? What
Mm,
what what is blessed to us? Is it
mm.
living a life like the disciples did, Jesus did, or is it living a life like Abraham or Solomon?
But what's super interesting about that example for me, from what you just said, is like, so Jesus ends with, "Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you."
Mm-hmm.
And we, Abraham is not considered a prophet. David, Solomon, not considered prophets.
Mm,
The people who are the prophets, we've got poor Elijah with really difficult mental health and deep anxiety and depression,
mm-hmm.
hurled up, cuddled up in a mountain, hoping to be fed by the ravens.
Yeah,
And that's the prophet. You've got
yeah,
Nathan, who calls David out, who's the prophet. So if we and Jesus we see, as prophet, priest, and only kind of eventually, after resurrection and ascension, get a sense of him being kind of Lord and King. But like, he's seen first and foremost as a teacher, as a prophet.
yeah,
And so, as you say, actually, that's a really good question for us to ask ourselves, is when we look into examples of faith, and we see that word about who's blessed, and us seeking God's blessing, who are the ones that we're looking at? And in Jesus' words here in the sermon, we should be looking at the prophets, and not the kings.
yeah, yeah. And I don't
Well,
know if this is
oh, go ahead. I was going to say that hits 20 minutes, so finish it off with your final thought. And that's
well, when I'm looking at the prophets, like who are the people that were most upset with the prophets and persecuting the prophets? It wasn't people from outside of
mm,
Israel. It was their own that they were calling to change and stuff, right? So this persecution could be coming from, that even Jesus is talking about here, it could be coming from within the body, within our own
mm,
community, not
mm.
outwhere. But that seems like a good place to end.
Can I? So I'm just going to
Yeah.
throw in one quick thing, only because it ties back into what you said at the beginning,
Hey, we can
which
go
is that idea about
all day.
yeah, 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 yeah. If you'd like to hear more, please turn the page. Um, but it's just that idea that like as you were saying at the beginning about not taking criticism from people,
You wouldn't take advice.
who don't. Was that?
Don't take criticism from
Or take
anyone you
advice?
don't take
Yeah,
advice from. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And there's actually this place by which, like, the prophets were there, as you say, to call them out. And yes, in one sense, they would seek advice from the prophets and always hated accepting the criticism from the prophets, right? They
Yeah.
wanted the advice that led to what they perceived as being kind of cultural blessing, and didn't want the criticism. But the criticism was always meant there not to tear them down, but to actually build them up into the blessed people of God, who then could bless others. And
Yeah.
so if we're unwilling to, as you say, and as you've challenged us to today, to take that step to kind of accept the criticism, accept that kind of calling out, only if we're willing to accept those things can we actually begin to walk and understand what it is to both receive God's blessing and be that blessing to other people.
Hmm. Yeah.
And just in case anyone is curious, none of this has been pre-scripted, and I had no idea we were going to talk about any of the stuff we did, or that Derek was going to bring his recommendation for advice this morning. So it's been really fantastic and an enjoyable journey, and give thanks to God for being with us and speaking to us, and using all of the things that we travel through with our mouths, and not as like and Jesus
There's got
opened
to
his
be a better
mouth,
way to
spoke
say
some
that one.
truth. Yeah, well, Derek, as you edit it, if you figure it out, otherwise
Nope.
we just let it ride. But Jesus opened his mouth and taught people. We open our mouths and we try to do the best that we can, but we're not Jesus. So,
No.
but thank you for joining us. God bless you with all that you have. And Derek, have you got a short prayer to send us out?
Sure. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this time that we can come together and learn more, not just about you, but even ourselves and those around us. Lord, we pray that you would speak to us, Lord, that you would give us opportunities to be comfort to those who are mourning, that you would give us chances to be, or opportunities to be merciful to those who need mercy, or that we can be there for people in a real way. Um, and Lord, that you would bless us, and not just financially or with wealth or whatever it may be, property, Lord, but just bless us in however you see fit. Lord, that we follow you and you continue to guide us. Give us the faith and courage to see what you are doing, seen and unseen, and that we may help. Amen. All right, blessings all.
Take care.